We now know that Georgia will be an underdog for the first time since the year 2020. So it's been almost 4 seasons, I should say, since the Bulldogs have gone into a game as an underdog. Right now, they're listed as a 3.5 point dog to Texas. So that line's moved about 4 points since the summer. And we're going to talk about that for a little bit here. I mean, Georgia's only in Kirby's time as head coach. And if you were with me the other day, Georgia's only been an underdog 9 times so far in the time at which Kirby's been the head coach. And those times were, I'll go in order here, from most to least. The Alabama SEC championship game in 2018, where both teams were ranked in the top five, if my math's correct. Alabama was a 12-point favorite in that game. Auburn in Athens was a 10-point favorite. LSU in 2019 in the SEC championship game was a 7-point favorite. Ole Miss was a 7-point favorite in 2016. In 2020, Alabama was a 6-point favorite. Notre Dame was a 5-point favorite over Georgia in 2017 on the road up there. Alabama in 2018 for the national championship was a 3.5-point favorite. Tennessee was a 3.5-point favorite over Georgia in 2016. A lot of these games are 2016. I'm saying 2016 a fair amount. And then the Clemson game to start the 21 season, Georgia was a 3-point dog. So there's several games in here where Georgia wins slightly under half of them. So there have been 9 of these. And Georgia's won 3, so not slightly under. They've only won 3. They've lost 6. But I will add that in the time at which sort of not the first season, Georgia is 3-4 in those games, straight up. So I think it makes sense to me that Texas is favored in this game. I may well pick Texas to win and cover. We'll see as the week goes on. But these are the moments in the season that really do matter. And, Oregon beating Ohio State was one example. Alabama beating Georgia was another good example. I guess you could say I have to follow up by saying Vanderbilt beating Alabama. But really, the other 2 games I'm talking about, there have been a few really big games this year so far. Texas, Michigan, Georgia, Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State. If you want to throw Clemson, Georgia in there, you can. That game looks bigger than it did, perhaps. But these are the moments in seasons that define seasons. And as we've seen here over time, away from home, Georgia can win these games. They also lose them. You look at the game, well, let's see. The 2020 game at Alabama, that is the only road game that Georgia's lost as an underdog. So, is that right? They've been an underdog to Alabama, but it's typically been in Atlanta or in other places. So they've been an underdog to Alabama 3 times since Kirby's been the head coach. It lost all 3 of those games. 2 of those 3 games were in Atlanta. One for the national championship, one for the SEC championship. They were an underdog against Tennessee at home. They were in 2016. They were underdog at Ole Miss in 2016. But the non-Athens wins were Charlotte against Clemson as a 3-point dog, and then at Notre Dame where they were a 5-point dog. That one didn't. That seemed wrong, and looking back on it, certainly seems wrong. But nonetheless, this is a real opportunity for both these teams. I will say, I was talking with Matt earlier today, and I'm talking with some other folks too. I really think the winner of this game is going to be in the playoff. If the loser is Georgia, it makes it more complicated. They can't lose, probably can't lose. But I gotta say, I'm not sure how many other games the Florida game could be more difficult than people think. I don't think it's going to be the most difficult game Georgia has left at all. I don't. But I think that game could be more difficult than people want to say. And Tennessee and Ole Miss are not at all looking like they did. They just aren't. And, no hate. But like when you play an SEC schedule, this is what happens. You get into these situations where you're not scoring 70 points on Furman. You're struggling to score against LSU, where you're playing a real football game, I should say. And you look at Clemson, they lost by 30 to Georgia. That game was not an anomaly. And now you look at Clemson, and they're just flying up and down the field on everybody. So, has Clemson suddenly figured it out? I mean, not if you watch Kid Klubnik play. He's still having the same issues that he had against Georgia in terms of accuracy and so forth, but the level of competition is not the same. Texas has played good teams. They have not played teams like Georgia. And, all due respect to Michigan, no, they're not good. I mean, Clemson would be. I would take Clemson against Michigan. I would take them again. I don't know who else Texas has played, but it's not been a who's who. I would take Clemson against Oklahoma. I do think Texas's win against OU was a good, solid win. I need to watch it. I haven't had a chance to watch that game yet. I watched the bulk of their Michigan game. They were just better than Michigan, period. They were just bigger, badder than Michigan. And so there's that. So Georgia's going to be, the national perception is that Georgia will not win this game. And that's just not been the case outside of games against Alabama for a long time with Georgia. You got to think about it. The only other team they've lost to this decade has been Florida once. And that was a long time ago. And, there's just not been a lot of losses for Georgia. From 2017 on, non-Alabama losses off the top of my head. Auburn on the road, very difficult in 17. 18, they lost to LSU on the road. Texas in the Sugar Bowl. That was a very important game for Texas. That was not a very important game for Georgia. 19, they lost to South Carolina. And then LSU, they lost second at home, and LSU at the Dome, and they lost to the Gators. So they lost 6 non-Alabama games since 2017. 6. And that's, saying something. Now, with that said, this Texas team is a lot like the Alabama teams used to be with size and so forth. I don't know, here we are Sunday night. I don't know if Isaiah Bond, what the sort of status is on. I don't know. Sark said after the game, he did it early, talking about his ankle, and then he re-aggravated it later in the game. He wasn't able to go. We'll continue to monitor him. We'll see how that goes. For sure, Georgia has struggled with very good wide receivers, but everyone struggles with really good wide receivers. So that's kind of part of the ball game. But, I think this is a real opportunity. I have to say, I think this is a real opportunity for Georgia. I wouldn't say they have to turn their season around. I think it's a great chance to win an important game. You get bonus points for winning on the road. I think it's right there, but you got to go do it. Defensively, Georgia, I have not said this in a long time, but defensively they've got to play better. So lately against Alabama and against State, they got beat by the big ball a lot. And, that happens not just for any one reason. It's not just because the DBs are bad. You've got to have a pass rush. What are you doing on first down? Is it 2nd and 1 and they're just going to throw a deep ball? Your problem is not just that they're throwing the deep ball. It's that you got in 2nd and 1 to begin with. So Texas, is having to adjust the way that they've done a really good job, just by the way, of adjusting their situation. They lost 2 really good running backs at the beginning of this season, and that was problematic. But when you look at Texas, they're number 7 in total offense and number 1 in total defense. Again, this has not been murderer's row. Colorado State, Michigan, Texas San Antonio, Louisiana Monroe, Mississippi State, and then Oklahoma. So They have not allowed more than 13 points this season. Their passing defense is only allowing, and that was a strength for Georgia coming into this past game. Their passing defense is only allowing 126, but Texas's numbers will adjust as this season moves forward. They're not going to play. They have a very advantageous SEC schedule. They do for sure. And I think Georgia's going to have to score 30 points to win this game. 30 points or more to win this game would be my suspicion. But, Florida is getting better. They will play Texas the week after they play the Dogs. They got to go to Vanderbilt, Texas. They will beat Vanderbilt. I can't imagine. I mean, you would imagine they would beat Vanderbilt, but I would pay attention to that game if I were Texas. And then the close is just physicality beyond belief. I mean, you've got to go to Arkansas, a team that's pretty good, and then you got the usual fight. Well, they're not used to it, but the fight with Kentucky, and then they got to play A&M a week after. I mean, but there's not a lot of losses that I'm seeing right there. You know what I mean? Like, they could lose 2 games, but in order for that to happen, they'd probably have to lose to Georgia. And as a 3.5 point favorite, you probably should win the game. Just saying. So Texas has been in this situation a few times, and they usually win. They're 4-2 this decade as a 4-point favorite or better. No, they're 5-2 this decade. Excuse me. Now, with that said, the teams that they were 4-point favorites or better than, or anywhere from 0 to 4 as the favorite, those teams were Kansas State, Oklahoma, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and Texas Christian. This is different than that. Texas is different than they have been in the past too, but twice last year they were in this scenario as a very, I wouldn't say narrow, half touchdown favorite, and they lost one of those games, which is to Oklahoma. And they had no business losing that game. Can we just say that out loud? And they should have never lost that game to Oklahoma last year. They made sure that didn't happen this year. But I can't recall the Kansas State game from last year, but I feel like it was very close and should not have been, it felt like. But that was the last 2 years. They've been in some knife fights. They got upset by Oklahoma last year. They lost by 4. They beat Kansas State by 3, not covering that line. So, let's just see. I mean, I think this is a great opportunity for Georgia, but there's only so much explaining away the way that Georgia's been this season. They are not putting games away, or they did not put the game away against Mississippi State until, I would say, deep into the fourth quarter, because when they scored that touchdown to go up 17, I mean, they killed a lot of clock. That drive was an important drive this season. Because the State wasn't going to win that game, but that drive sometimes can get things going. I was surprised Georgia played really well at moments in that game, and then they just kind of either got lulled to sleep. The interception in the end zone definitely was a play that sparked Mississippi State, because State couldn't move. I mean, this was past this point, but State couldn't move the ball. They could not get first downs. And, Georgia was basically burying them. They got up 24, and then the game became a 10-point game at one point. So games ebb and flow, but that game particularly, it felt like Georgia just didn't blow them out. It wasn't a slow motion blowout, kind of like Auburn was. It wasn't, it's just been a lot tougher this season for Georgia. Is it because they're not as good? Well, I mean, certainly they're not as good. I don't think it's 21 and 22. They might not be as good as 23, but there were moments in 23 where they weren't so hot at the beginning of the season either, and maybe even at the end too. So, it's just such a great opportunity for Georgia, because when you're a narrow underdog, 3 points or fewer, and if this game were in Atlanta, Georgia would probably be a 2-point favorite, maybe something like that. So if it were on a neutral field in Atlanta's a bad example. if this game were in, at the Sugar Bowl, Georgia would probably be favored. So they think, oh, they're the better team, narrowly. So that's what these tight lines mean, is that, that you get a home field advantage. If you don't think that matters, ask Alabama. They beat Georgia at home and lost to Vanderbilt a week later, or, Georgia's only loss lately has been on the road, has been, at Alabama. This they have not lost at home since 2019, right? So they beat the number one college football playoff team since 2019. I mean, there's a lot of stuff at home that you can do to create stuff, and we'll see what Texas's atmosphere is like. It's one of the few places Kirby's not coached at. He's coached against Texas as an assistant coach and as a head coach, but he's not. I've never been to Austin for a football game. I've been there for basketball. It's a great. I think it's a great town, but the challenge is not going to be the people in the stands. It's going to be the players on the field. And it's not surprising that they beat Oklahoma the way they did. They just OU can't score, and that's been pretty evident the whole season. And by the way, and I know they'll never see this, but all you smart-ass Oklahoma fans that were, questioning some of what we were saying, those of us that do what I do, or specifically me, about Oklahoma and Brent Venables, that's not looking so hot right now. So let's revisit that in the near future. I mean, now Oklahoma is, what do they got, 2 losses or 3? I think they have only 2 this season so far, but they almost lost to Auburn, and that was ugly. The Houston the win against Houston was not pretty. The win against Tulane was not pretty. I mean, they got beat by Tennessee, got worked by Tennessee. And then, they escaped Jordan Hare. They got trucked by Texas. That can happen sometimes. But, they still have to play South Carolina. They still have to play Ole Miss. They still have to play Missouri. They still have to play Alabama. They still have to play LSU. Those are 5 more games they could lose. It is not out of the question that they go 5-7. They won't. But they probably will lose 3 or 4 of these games. And so, everybody was talking about how he was going to reshape Oklahoma and all this stuff. The Oklahoma coach they should have hired is at Tennessee right now. That's all there is to it. The guy's 20-12. He's 11-10 in league play, and then that's not even SEC play. That's Big 12 play, which is not at all the same thing. I think you are looking to see. You are learning now, but. Yeah, 3.5. I mean, I'm refreshing it. That means it could go to 4.5. That means it could go to 2.5 or 2. But Georgia will be an underdog, and so Kirby will get to do his whole venom about that. But it doesn't need to be that people are doubting you. I mean, you need to play better. That if Georgia wants to, what's wild about this, y'all, is that, and I can put it on the screen. I will right now. This Georgia, no, I can't put it on the screen. This Georgia team has. I mean, I don't know about it. This is me putting words in people's mouths, but they have lost confidence of some of the fan base. They are narrowly. I mean, they are slightly underdog to win the national championship, only to Texas. Texas is plus 400. Georgia's plus 450. That's amazing. Like that, as in the doldrums as everybody is in Georgia world, which is like their happy place, they are at plus 450. I mean, I don't know what happens in this game. I don't, but my suspicion is that there's just Georgia and Texas both. There's not a lot of losses left on both of these, teams' slates. Doesn't look like it to me, at least. So this is an important game. If Texas wins this game, they're going to be in the playoff. If Georgia wins it, they'll probably be in the playoff. But if Texas wins it, they're definitely going to be in the playoff. They will almost certainly at that stage be in the college football playoff. In the SEC championship game. Now, Georgia wins it. I don't know. There's a lot to go. LSU's only got LSU does not have a loss in league play, I don't think. Alabama only has 1 loss. Georgia only has 1 loss. Like Georgia's like in 5th place right now in the SEC. I think if my math is right. Texas, LSU, Alabama's in front of them. I don't know if is Vanderbilt undefeated in league play. Let me look that up real quick because that would be fascinating. And I can't recall off the top of my head with all the rule breaking and all the discussions to get. Let me give me my standings. So A&M is in first place. So A&M is played 3 league with, they're undefeated. A&M, LSU, Texas, and then technically Georgia's in 4th place because have they played 4 league games? Is that right? Mississippi State, Auburn, Kentucky, Alabama. Wow. Yeah, they've had just, that's another thing to not forget. This has been a very difficult first 7 games. I mean, it's just been a tough slog. It's been a tough slog. But there's a real, these are the teams that really still can get to the SEC championship, which it's going to be a lot of people about it. A&M, LSU, Texas, Georgia, Bama, Arkansas, which probably won't happen, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. They all only have a loss. A 2-loss team, I'm not going to talk about Florida and Ole Miss and Oklahoma. That was a tough loss for Ole Miss. Man, that was not good. But Georgia's collective wins in the league are over teams that are 1-9 in league play. So are they beating up on bottom feeders? In league play they might be, but they sure did beat Clemson by a lot. And last I checked, they're in the top 10. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.